Okay, when in the middle of a digression of a sugya, we were discussing para aduma, and when the para aduma has it has the psul of a carbon, even though it's not a carbon. So we said there was a hashchasa, if Avodah Zorah or an immoral act was done to the para aduma, it would render it possible. We saw the Rav answer the stira in our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says you can't go ahead. A guy is chayish for znus. We saw a brisa you could buy an animal from a guy for a carbon. Mashmi is not. So we had a few terutzim. Rav Padis' teretz was our Mishnah's Rebbe Eliezer that's chayish for znus, and the brisa is according to Rabbanan that's not chayish for znus. Now the Gemara suggested perhaps the reason why you can't buy a para aduma is because of Shila. So we're going to revisit that, but I'd like to go ahead and redo it. We're going to revisit it on the base, but I'd like to see on the Amid Aleph exactly what's going on. Okay, I'd like to see on the Amid Aleph because we're going to see a Rashi. Okay, so the Gemara about 7 lines up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 8, 9 lines up. What's the reason Rebbe Eliezer says you can't bring a carbon from a guy? The Tani Shila. The Tani Shila, my time of Rebbe Eliezer, Dabe el b'nei Yisrael, v'yichwe lecha para aduma tamima. Now, Yisrael yikchu, ve'ein oivik yichavim yikchu. So if you look at Rashi, the bottom Rashi, yikchu, it doesn't mean to buy, it means yimachu, to sell. Koribe v'yakichu. If we go ahead and conjugate the word v'yichku as v'yakichu, it means let them sell. So a Jew can sell, but a guy can't. A Jew can sell, but a guy can't. That's why. So we now have another reason why you can't go ahead and buy the carbon, not because you chayish v'znus, but you can't buy a carbon. What? Just like you can't buy a paraduma, you can't buy a carbon. Okay, and now we're going to analyze that shita. We're going to analyze that shita for itself. So Gufa, going back now on Chav Gimel Amid Beis, about 10 lines up, Gufa, Tani Shila, my time with the Rebbe Eliezer. What's the reason for Rebbe Eliezer? The Chsiv, Daber El B'nei Yisrael, V'yichu, B'nei Yisrael Yichu, V'ein Oived Kichav Yichu, and again we're reading V'yichu as V'yakichu. Elamayata. If you're telling me that's true, it says Daber El B'nei Yisrael, V'yichu Li Truma. It says speak to B'nei Yisrael, V'yichu Li Truma. So if we're going to be consistent, with the lashon of the yichu, so by truma also we should go ahead and say you could read it as vayakichu, that you would not be able to go ahead and purchase from a guy anything that is listed regarding the what? Regarding the Mishkan. Let me just get a chumash for a second. So if this is true, and we're going to read v'yikchu as v'yakichu, and you can't buy. So v'yidaba Hashem Moshe Leimer, daber el b'nei Yisrael, v'yakichu li truma me'es kolish asher yidvenu libu tikwesh trumasi. V'zois ha-truma. These are the gifts you should give: zahav, kesef, unechayshes, usecheles. Notice there's a vav in front of all of these. The argamon, purple wool. The solah shani, red wool. V'sheish and linen, v'izim and goatskin, v'oyres elim, skins of rams, ma'adamim dyed red, v'oyres tchashim, the oris of the animal known as the tachash, v'atzei shitim, and notice a vav by each one of these. Shemen lama'ar, shemen for the right, b'samim l'shemen ha'mishcha, v'l'kares hasamim, avnei shoam v'avnei miluim le'efoy v'l'chayshen. So if this is the case, fellas, therefore, it says v'yichu, you should not be able to go ahead and purchase from a guy avnei shayam or avnei miluyim. Correct? Because again, we're reading v'yichu is vayakichu. Good? So that's the Gemara's kasha. Says the Gemara. That's the Gemara's going to develop a kasha. V'chi tema hachanami the bnei Yisrael yichu b'nei v'cham yichu v'chi tema hachanami b'am Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel. Shalu es Rebbe Eliezer. They asked Rebbe Eliezer, "Ad heichen kibbut aveim? How far does kibbut aveim go?" And again, it's the great Rebbe Eliezer speaking. Come and see. There was a case with a guy in Ashkelon. V'Dama ben Nesina Shemai, and his name is Dama ben Nesina. Pamachas bikshu mimenu avonim le'ephod. They went ahead and they asked for the precious gems for the ephod. B'shishim rivi b'schar for 600,000. Rav Kahana Masni b'shmoina rivi 800,000. V'yimavteichos munachas tachas mereshosef shalaviv. And the keys to the safe were underneath his father's head. The late Sarah, he wasn't with Sarah's father by waking him up. So what's the kasha? Guys, it's the kasha. Nice story. It's a kasha. You see that what? They were going to buy, no, they were going to buy Avnei Shoyam. But it says V'yichu. And just like you read V'yichu by Paraduma is Vayakichu, by Truma you should also read as Vayakichu. And therefore you should not be able to buy it. So how could they buy it? So the Gemara answers, Avnei Shoyam Hifsik. Rashi says there's no Vav. The Vav stops. The Vav stops. Avnei Shoyam Hifsik Inyan. So therefore, since there's no Vav, it doesn't connect back to the V'yichu. The Gemara Vavavnei Miluyim Ksiv, the Hoda Arve, the Vav brings it back. So in other words, the kasha remains intact. V'oid Ketani Seifa, L'shana Acheres, Noiledis Para Aduma Be'edroi. The next year was born a Para Aduma. Nichtasu Chachmei Yisrael Letzloi, Amalehem, Yoidei Ani B'chem Shem Ani Mevakesh B'chem Kol Moment Shem Ba'olam Atem Moisneli. Achshav Ani Mevakesh B'chem Ela Oisem Moment Shem Sarati B'shvil Abba. I'll only ask for the amount that I would have lost by not waking my father, right? So what do you see? Guys, you answered up Avnei Shoyam, and we said, no, it's Avnei Miluyim, Kasha. And now we're asking from Paradum itself, where you learned for Yichu, V'yakichu, in Sheila, that you can't go ahead and take it from a guy. You see over here, they're going to buy a Paraduma from Dama, and Dama was a guy. How could you buy a Paraduma? If you read it V'yakichu, you mean you can't sell. Only a Jew can sell, but not a guy. So A, we asked from what? From Avnei Shoyam, and B, we're asking what from the Paraduma itself. On that, the Gemara answers, Hasam, by the Paraduma, Al Yidei Tigrei Yisrael Zavin. In other words, first Dama, it was bought by a Jew, the Paraduma, and then it was bought by the there was a middleman over there, and therefore what? It was permitted. Okay, so you were able to answer that. You weren't able to answer Avnei Shoyam. Okay, before we go on, just a few ha'aris vis-a-vis. We did this Gemara very well when we did it in Kiddushin in the Sugi of Kivud Av'eim. But some of the things we mentioned there is very, very, I think, very wichtig to mention now. Why is, if your father was sleeping and a guy comes to the door and he says, listen, I know you have this very precious thing in your safe. I'm willing to give you $10 million. Don't you think your father would want you to wake him up? Can you imagine? The end way of knowing he's coming back. Can you imagine Nesina getting up? Dama tells him what happened. The guy would fly off the handle. It's a shver kasha. So I heard a very geschmacka teretz from Rav Rosen, Zeichet Tzadik Levracha. He was one of the Magidi Shiurim in the Mir Beis Medrash. He was in Alta Mira from Shanghai, and he said a beautiful teretz. Because we can understand why Dama warranted getting in the Gemara. After all, you see his tremendous Kivud Av'eim. I hate Kivud Av'eim. But why in the world didn't the Sina get in the Gemara? In other words, think about it. To get into the Gemara is no small feat. Why is the Sina getting there? Said Rav Rosen beautifully. Where did Dama get this love of Kivud Av'eim from? He got it from the Sina. And Enochinami, when Sina woke up and he heard, the Sina said, by George, you got it. He was so happy that his son had gone ahead and absorbed this wonderful, wonderful lesson. So therefore, by saying Dama ben Nesina, it's answering a kasha. It's answering why Nesina wouldn't have been upset, because he was the one who raised Dama. And I have a great proof to this, guys. Let's continue the Gemara. I have a great proof to this. Continues the Gemara. You want to say that the reason Rebbe Eliezer does not let you buy a paradum or a carbon is because of Vayakichu. That's the reason. Well, 1 second. Rabbi Eliezer lechayish l'revia, and Rabbi Eliezer is not chayish for what? For the actus nus. V'atanya Amr Rabbi Eliezer. They tell Rabbi Eliezer Maisa. There was an incident. V'lakchuhu min ha'ovdei kechavim, and they bought the paraduma They bought the paraduma from what? From a guy. V'dama shmai. V'imi lo ramat shmai. Says Rashi, v'dama shmai. If you look, what does Rashi say? Dama shmai. Zehu haniska l'mayla. That's the one mentioned above. Why doesn't it say Dama ben Nesina, guys? Why does it just say Dama? I think it's a beautiful proof to Rev Rosen. When it came to the Maisa of Kivud of Aim, then we mentioned the Sina. Over here, we're speaking about the purchase of what? Of the Paraduma. It had nothing to do with Kivud of Aim. So why do we mention? Just Dama. Isn't it nice? I think it's a very nice diak to go ahead and say, we mentioned just Dama. So I think it would be a nice riot to Rav Rosen's Pshat. Since it's not speaking about Kivud of Aim, there's no reason to mention the Sina. So he just mentions Dama. Okay. So Amalem Rebbe Eliezer, Misham Raya, Yisrael Hoyim Mishamra. Okay, so we'll get into the sugi in a second. Just a beautiful Meshech Chochmah that I always speak out. The Meshech Chochmah speaks out that the stone, according to Yerushalmi, the stone that was missing was the Yoshvei stone. Or the Yoshvei, not stone, but the Yoshvei stone. It was the Yoshvei stone. And the Yoshvei stone was the stone of Binyamin. Meshech Chochmah makes a cheshbon. The only son that was mechabed his father was Binyamin. Everyone knew about Mechiras Yosef. The only one who was, and no one told Yaakov. Yosef knew. He didn't tell Yaakov. The only one who didn't know about it was Binyamin. So Nimsa, the only one who was mechabed his father was Binyamin. Memela, the Maisa Kivud of Aim of Dama ben Nesima came about with stone, the Yoshvei stone, because he was the only one who was mechabed his father. And we spoke out, and that's why the Beis Hamikdash is built in the Chelik of Binyamin, because Kol Shem Mechabed As Ava V'Imai, the Gemara says, Ki Lidarti B'Neim, it's like I lived among them, V'chiv Datani, and it's Mechabed me. So therefore, Kadosh Baruch Hu put the Beis Hamikdash in the Chelik of Binyamin. Okay, so anyway, we're holding by a kasha. Rabbi Eliezer says you can't go ahead and buy a paraduma from a guy or an animal from a guy. We gave two reasons, either because of Chayish Vaznus, like Rav Padis, or because of Sheila, who says what? Because what? You can't buy. Fred the Gemara, how can you say that? You see that what? That they did buy the paraduma from Dama. I want you chayish that what? That a goy had been roiveya the animal. So you see that what? You're not chayish visnus. On that, Rabbi Eliezer comments, Amalem Rabbi Eliezer, Misham Raya, you don't have a raya from there. Misham, you don't have a raya. Yisrael hayu Misham Maisa. Yisrael was watching this animal, Mishosh and Nolda, from the time it was born. By the time it was born. So it's a kasha, guys. You want to say that what? That you're only chayish for what? For vayikachu, buying. You see over here, he was chayish for Revia. On that, the Gemara answers that's a kasha. And for the Gemara, Rabbi Eliezer is chayish for both. Rabbi Eliezer tarti yislay. He holds both. He holds kicha that you have to buy it from a guy. You can't buy it from a guy. You have to buy it from a yid, and also you chayish revia. Islay kicha. He has kicha like Sheila. Chayish nami revia. In addition, he's chayiv also out for the act of reveya. He's chayish for that as well, and therefore you needed shmira. You needed that the animal was watched from the time it was born in order to avoid that problem. Okay, so again, the Gemara is attacking the shita of Rabbi Eliezer, who's chayish for snus in an animal. If that's the case, Rabbi Eliezer holds you can't bring a carbon from a guy, and in addition, you can't buy a paraduma from a guy. But now we're going ahead and giving two reasons: one, al snus, and a second reason because what you can't actually buy, even the one chayish for snus, you can't go ahead and buy because you need what? You need vayakichu. It has to be sold by a Jew. Amamar, going back over the previous brisa. Yisrael hoyim sham misa mishash shenolda. Rabbi Eliezer was confronted with the case of Dama, and the answer was, from the time that animal was born, it was watched. Now, that's not such a strange thing. Since we spoke out that the paraduma is worth a fortune, they would keep it under lock and key, right? They would be very, very careful. So it's not such a doichik dikateris to say they're watching it. Fred Gemara v'nechish dilma ravoy le'ima ki having ma'abra. Perhaps the mother of this paraduma had been an act of znus done to it when it was pregnant. The amarava vlad hanagachas, the vlad of an animal that shtoises asura He uvlada nachu. Because not only did it shtois, but the vlad that was part of it also scored. Vlad hay nervas asura is also for a carbon. He uvlada nirvo, because both an actus nus was done to both. So how does it help that you watched from the time it was born that this animal, this nus was not done to this animal? We could have, an actus nus could have been done to this animal when it was in his mother's womb. And you had no way of knowing that what? That this mother was going to give birth to a paraduma, that you would have to watch the mother. So it's a gavaldic kasha. Okay. Again, this is going against the day that uba yerachimo, guys, that the uba is considered part of the mother. Like, and therefore, if you're Raiveya the mother, you're being Raiveya the baby. And for the Gemara, Amy Yisrael hayu meshabrim oisa mishashen noitzra. Okay, that they didn't watch it from the time it was born. They watched it from the time it was conceived. So let's say what? Let's say the animal, an actus nus had been done by the animal, but the baby wasn't formed yet, so there's no concern. There's no concern. The only concern was if the mother was pregnant at the time of this nus. We know for sure that the mother was not. No act of nus was done to the mother at the time before the time it was pregnant. So when it got pregnant, we watched it. So again, in the first teretz, we watched it from the time it's born. Now we're watching it from the time of its conception. Now you got a problem. What happens if the mother, you hold that the mother this nus was done to the mother even before it was formed? Then you got a problem. That nan, a Mishnah in Tamura, kol psulim legabi mizbeach, anything that's possible from the mizbeach, vladeiseya mutarim, the vladas are mutarim, v'tani Allah, Rabbi Eliezer oisa, Rabbi Eliezer says it's asa. Now, guys, so an animal, let's go through it. It's an animal that had an actus nus, mutar mizbeach. Everyone holds not. Is the baby? Tanakama says yes. Rabbi Eliezer says no. Rabbi Eliezer is the one that gave the teretz by Dama that it's speaking where we watched it from the time it's born. So l'chari, this is going along those lines. The paper trail is leading back to Rabbi Eliezer. We see that Rabbi Eliezer is chayish for what? Revia, in addition to the Yikachu. We see that it's not enough to watch it from the time it's born. Because why? Because if the mother was nirva at the time of its being pregnant, it'd also be a problem. Now we see it's a problem even before it was what? Impregnated. Before. So if any actus nus was done to this animal, this mother, the child wouldn't be good. So what's Rabbi Eliezer's teretz? On that, the Gemara answers, the Tanakam Rabbi Eliezer, Kishenirvu, Kishen Mukdashim. When after the actus nus happened, when the animal was kodesh already. Aval kashen chulin dibriyakom mutarim. So it's not a problem. In other words, if there was a din of revia to the animal, and then you magdish the animal, it's okay. The problem machlokes is where machlokes is with the baby is when it was. I don't know if it's what I just told you is true. I'm talking about the baby. In other words, if the act of harva was done when it's chulin, the baby is okay. So therefore, it's not a problem that they didn't watch the mother. Machlokes is when if the baby is usher, even when it was chulin, but if it's kodesh, the baby everyone holds babies usher. So you got a problem, guys. Let's fair rice. Rabbi Eliezer, you say that what? You say that it's you say that a paraduma, that an actus nus was done, you can't use it. They bought it from Dama. You wanted a taina, the animal was watched from the time the paraduma was watched from the time it was born, not good enough. You wanted to say it was watched from the time of conception, not good enough. You want to say that while it was watched, and there was nothing's going to go ahead and permit this paraduma of Dama to be bought, because you couldn't do anything to watch it. Not possible. Because if an actus nus was done to the mother, the child is out. So we have a problem. How do you buy it from Dama? So you know what the answer is? They watch the mother. Until now, everything's going on the Vlad. They watch the mother. Says Gemara. So Michael Meimar, Ema Yisrael Hayu Mishamim Oisal Le'ima Mishashin Noitzra. From the time the mother was formed, they watch this mother. Maybe the mother's mother. Okay, the Gemara in Tamura says the reason why this is Asar is because of Bizayin. Any connection back to what? For an animal of Kachim, it's a Bizayin to have its nus associated with it. We'll only take it to the extent of what? Of the second generation. We won't go back to 3 generations. That we won't do. Okay, so Rabbi Eliezer has gone ahead what? And he's held to serve. That they watched the mother from the time it was the mother. They watched the mother from the time the baby was conceived. Now, how do they know that this baby is going to be a paraduma? Mehekatesa. Fred the Gemara. Amamai Yisrael hoy v'shamrim oisa mishoshen noitzra mino yadinon. How do they know it's going to be a paraduma? So Amrav Kahana, kois edoi ma'avirin lefonecha, a kois of red, they pierced in front of it, b'shasha oilo le'azacha. At the time of copulation, when the zacha was living with the cow, they went ahead and pierced in front of the cow a red kois, and this is going to go ahead what and make the babies a red. Because we have the same ma'aser with Pashas Vayetze with the sticks with Yaakov Avinu influencing the color of the child by peeling sticks and making speckle. So we see that even human beings, b'shas tashmas, what you're supposed to think about, affects the baby. So that's how they knew it was going to be a red baby.
Lace, just a question: if the an act was done to the mother,
you're not supposed to talk and drive at the same time.
But you see, I'm listening though. So if an act was done to the mother, isn't the mother would be sterile? We learned. So how would she conceive and have a baby?
What do you mean?
Then we learned that if it had nirva, that if the owner, the guy, would have relation with the animal, the would be sterile. Then we learned that.
Yes.
That in other words, she can't give birth. She wouldn't be able to have a child.
We absolutely did, but we're going to see that after a certain age, it's only when it's younger, when it gets a little older. Okay. Anyway, I think it's a good kasha. The Gemara might ask the kasha. Ihachi amai domel yikarim. If you can have a paraduma so easily by going ahead and piercing some red in front of it, what's the wise? And for the Gemara, hoyel shtei soras paisleis. Since 2 hairs passel. In other words, you have 2 white hairs to black, no, it's going to passel. So in other words, having a red cow is not a problem. Having a kosher red cow is the problem. So Fred Maishna did who? So why Dama? Amrav Kahana bin Muchsekes. In other words, not everyone who pierces a red in front, right? Dama, Muchsekes, that if you pierce red in front, it's going to work. Yosef Rav Ami v'Reb Yitzchak Nafcha. Akila, the Reb Yitzchak Nafcha, Rav Ami and Reb Yitzchak Nafcha was sitting on the porch of Reb Yitzchak Nafcha. Pasachad minay v'Omar v'chein haya Reb Eliezer paisel b'chol karbanis. Just like he passed by paraduma, he passed by all karbanis. All right. Cool one. Pasach idach minayu. The other one said, "Amar mayo sibulei chavuroy Rebbe Eliezer." Why did they ask Rebbe Eliezer? It's this pasuk called sign Kedar, all that sign of Kedar of Yishmael yikapsu lecha, all that sign of Kedar. They lasalavai. They're going to bring them as karbanis. So you see that you could bring a carbon. Like Rabbi Eliezer, how can you say you can't bring a carbon? You see, you can bring a carbon from Yishmael. Rabbi Eliezer, kulam geirim gerurim heim. All of these, this lust of love, is speaking about geirim that we didn't accept them, but they schlepped along. They became geirim, and therefore, since they became geirim by themselves, they're not goyim. Therefore, we can accept the kabbanis. Geirim heim lust of love. Amar Rav Yosef, Mikra. What's the pasuk? The pasuk says. He oz efoich el amim safa brura likra kulam b'shem Hashem la'avdoi b'shem echad. So that's what the pasuk says. What's the taich of the pasuk? What's the taich of the pasuk? Ki oz then efoich el amim. I'll turn over the nations. I'll change them. Safa brura. They'll all speak the same language. They'll all go back to Lashon Kodesh. They'll all go back kulam b'shem echad. But the pasuk continues, and it says, right, la'avdoi Shchem echad, to serve with one consent. La'avdoi shchem echad, to serve with one consent. So your kasha is this l'chayra. How could they go ahead and bring a carbon from the Ishmaelim? The Ishmaelim are what? They became ger and gerurim. So Amalei Abaya, v'dilma me avodas kechavim who the hadabahu, right? Maybe they what from avodas Zorah but they not became Jews. So Amalei Rabbi Yosef la'avdei shchem echad. It says la'avdei shchem echad. They all serve as one. L'chayra is the same as us. Rav Papa Masni Hachi. So this is the way Rav Ami brought down the Maisa, with Rav Yitzchak saying one thing and Rav Ami saying another thing. Now we're going to have the Maisa brought down with just the only difference, they both said the same thing. Rav Svidin Masni Hachi, the Travayu Ami, they both Rav Ami and Rav Yitzchak Nafta said, B'chein Hayi Rav Elazar Paisel B'chol Karbonis, V'Travayu Ami, they both said, Maya Siyu L'Chavil Rav Elazar, what are the Eskim? Koltzan Keda Yekbetsulach. Rabbi Elazar kulam gam gerum heim lasalavai u'may krok yozepach amim sofa brura likroi kulam b'shem Hashem maskal Rabbi Yosef v'dilma mavedes chachavim who the hadram who and they're not Jews. I'm like bayila of the shchem echad ksiv. Meisivei vayoyim Moshe. Okay, now we're going to ask on Rabbi Elazar. I'm going to show you cases where goyim could bring karbanis. I'm going to show you cases where goyim could bring. I'm going to show you cases where goyim were able to bring karbanis, and since that's the case, yeah, you have a kasha. Okay. Moshe says to Paro, you'll give us, zvachim v'olos. You see that we can go ahead and bring karbanos from a guy. And for the Gemara, koydem matan Torah shiny. It was different for matan Torah. Hashma vayikach Yisro choshim Moshe oile uzvachim ve'elikim. And Yisro was a guy. He brought karbanos. So it says the Gemara, and he brought them. He's from animals that he brought from Midyan. Says Yisroi nami koyd man Torah have, and that's the machlokes. Hanich lamadi yama Yisroi koyd man Torah have, el mandi yama me beis. According to mandi yama that Yisroi la'achem man Torah have mayik lemeimar. Says Yisroi Yisrael savan. He bought them from the Jews, so it's not a kasha. So again, Rebbe Lezer so far is held serve. You can't bring an animal from a guy. Tashma vayom shol me amalekim heviyim. There's Shol. In the background is Shol was commanded to go ahead and destroy Amalek. Shmuel tells him to destroy everything. There shouldn't be anything left over. And Shol had machmanis on the Meitav Atzoin. He brought what? He kept the best cattle, the best animals to bring his karbanis. So Vayom Shol tells Shmuel, Me Amaleki Heviyim. I brought it from the Amalekim. Asher Chama La'am Al Meitav Atzoin LaBakar. The people, they had rachmanis on the best soin and the bakar. L'man Zavayach L'Hashem L'Kecha, to go ahead and bring his karbanis. So what do you see? You could bring karbanis from a guy. Kashan Rebbe Eliezer, my meitav. When it says meitav at soin, the may meitav doesn't mean that you're going to bring the animal itself. You're going to sell it, and from that animal, you're going to buy an animal from that money. You're going to buy an animal from a guy and bring that as a Jew, and bring it as a carbon. Why did I say meitav? Why did they go ahead and save the best? Because again, people will jump at the chance to buy the best. But in Chinami, they weren't going to bring the animal itself. They were going to sell the animal, using that funds to buy animals from a Jew, and they were going to bring that as a carbon. So therefore, it's Rabbi Eliezer has held serve. Another kashan Rabbi Eliezer. Tashma. Okay, David HaMelech, in his time, there was a tremendous what? There was a Magefa, and David finds the Malach HaMashkes, he's standing on the goyrin of a Ravna HaYevusi. It says a Yevusi Pashas that he was a guy, and that ultimately is going to be the guys, the threshing floor, the goyrin of Ravna Yevusi is going to be the Makam Hamikdash. That's going to be the base Hamikdash is going to be. So he buys it, and Ravna gives him animals and a wagon, and David brings it up. Now the Gemara's kasha is Ravna was a guy, so how could David bring an animal? According to Rabbi Eliezer, says the Gemara. Vayoma Ravna el David yikach v'yal Adoni Hamelech hatoiv be'einav ure'ei habakar la'oila. See, the bakar should be a carbon oila. V'hamarigim, we'll see what that means. Uklei habakar le'etzim. Bottom line is, what do you see? That like Rabbi Eliezer, you should not be able to bring this, and yet you're bringing a carbon from a guy. So I'm Rav Nachman, a Ravna ger toisha for you. A Ravna was not a guy. A Ravna was a ger toisha. Well, a ger toisha is a guy, but he keeps the 7 mitzvahs bei Noach, and therefore one of the 7 mitzvahs bei Noach is a rayas. And the Issa rayas is what? Is bestiality. So you can therefore what? For sure, this animal that was given would not an act of revia be done to this animal. My moirigim, but just to digress, what's moirigim ama'ula? It's mita shel turbol. My mita shel turbol is Isa de kurkasa de dashna. It's a Isa that has teeth. It's a big board they used to thresh, guys. Picture a board with like teeth-like things, and they run it, bring it over the tfua, and we thresh the tfua. I'm Rabbi Yosef Mikra. Hine samtich lemoireg choretz chodosh ba'al pepiyos. Today, we had another question on Rabbi Eliezer. Vesaporis helu oil lashem. Okay, a little background over here. The Aron, the Bnei Yisrael went to war against the Pelishtim, and the Aron was stolen. The Aron was stolen by the Pelishtim. Amazingly enough, Shaul, it doesn't say this is a medrash, Shaul was able to get the luchos out of the Aron. So they had the Aron, but didn't have the luchos. That's a little known fact. So that Shaul had, the Pelishtim had the Aron in their possession for 7 months. During that, and what happened was, that's the day that when Eli heard that the Aron was stolen, he fell backwards and he broke his neck. So that was the day that Shiloh was destroyed. And the Aron was in the hands of the Pelishtim for 7 months. They had tremendous tzaras. They put the Aron in base Dagon. They had an Avodah Zorah of Dagon. Dagon was a merman. The top of him was a man. The bottom was a fish. And the first day was there, in the morning, they found Dagon totally fell over totally. They thought maybe it was happenstance. The next day, they found only the man part, but the fish part was still intact. So they knew they were having problems. They started suffering from hemorrhoids. And not only suffering, mice would come in and eat up their hemorrhoids. 7 months of Gehenna. They decided they're going to send the Aron back, but they're going to go ahead and make sure there wasn't just happenstance. They wanted to know it was a miracle that was performed. So they went ahead, they took 2 cows. Now, A, cows are not usually used to pull wagons. And B, these cows were nursing. And if they're nursing, they're not going to leave their young. And there was no driver. And this is where we've in the past said the argaz that the Pelishtim sent back a gift. There were 5 hemorrhoids, golden hemorrhoids, and five golden mice. And that was the argaz that was placed next to the Aron. They send it back. It goes directly back to Klal Yisrael. It goes to Yishar and it goes back. And it goes to Beit Shemesh. Unfortunately, whatever, we don't discuss what happened there because the people of Beit Shemesh didn't give it proper covenant, and as a result, the Magefer broke out. But here's what they did do. The poros that went ahead and brought this wagon, Helu Oilul Hashem. What do you see? The bottom line is that they went ahead and they brought karbanis from what? From animals that were in the Meshus of a guy. It says, so you can't be a raya from there. It was a rasha. In other words, it was for the time, special din, a rasha, but therefore you can't bring a raya. Hachanami mistaber to say it was a rasha. The loitei mahachi oilis nekeva mi ikka. We all know, guys, an oil can only be bought from Bezacha. How can you bring an oil from the keva? Ella, since it was a special dispensation, so not only was the dispensation to go ahead and bring animals from a guy, it was dispensation to go ahead and bring even female animals as an oila. Freddy my kusha, maybe I'll show you Dilma Bamas Yachid. Maybe they brought an oila on a Bamas Yachid, and on a Bamas Yachid you could bring a female. How do you know the bama of an individual that an oilas nekeva is permitted? Shnemar, it says Vayikach Shmuel Tlei Chalav Echad Ve'aleu Oila, and he brought up a tle that was nursing as an oila. So you see that what you can go ahead and bring up. It's a female. It says Vayalehu, right? It's mashma was a male. It says Gemara, no. I'm Rav Nachman Yitzchak Vayaleha ksiv. It doesn't ksiv is Vayaleha. They brought it up. So the bottom line is what that. The bottom line is that Rav Eliezer held serve. You know, it's from all the kashas. He brought in Rav Eliezer. He held serve, and now going back to the stira that we had on the opening of the perek, the first Mishnah said you can't go ahead and give your animal to a pundik of a goy because you're chayish v'harva, and On the other hand, you can buy animals for a guy for karbanis. So far I have three terutzim. We have Tachlifa in the name of Rav. We have Ravina. If Tachlifa said a guy won't be ma'anis his own animal, he will be ma'anis another animal. We have Ravina saying b'di'eved lechatchila. We have Rav Padas, the Mishnah is according to Rabbi Eliezer, who's chayish l'Ravia, which we've been dealing with until now, and the Bryce is according to the Chachamim. Here's Rabbi Yochanan throwing his hat into the ring. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, and this will answer Heshi's kasha. Gevul yeshla, pesuach mi bas shalosh shanim. If the actus nus was done to an animal less than 3 years old, ne'akeres, then it becomes sterile. Bas shalosh shanim ain't a ne'akeres. So Heshi, that would answer your kasha. Okay? So Esrei called Hani Tiyufta, they asked all the kashas to Rabbi Yochanan, and the Shani law, but Pchusim bas shalosh shanim, and he answered they're all less than 3 years old. Now you have a problem. You're telling me that what? That they're all less than 3 years old. I'm going to give you a problem. Cows less than 3 years old would not be able to have babies. The Maisa that with the Pelishtim were nursing cows. So if they were less than 3, how could they have babies? That's going to be the kasha. Toshma, Besaporis Helu Oilu Hashem, the B'chusa and Bashal Hashan. According to Rabbi Yochanan, these cows, they were less than 3 years old. Maskal Rav Huna Bereid Rav Nasan in Cain, Hainu Bes B'neim Kolu Babayis, that they kept their babies in the house. They left them there. Less than 3, how can they possibly go ahead, and how can they possibly go ahead and have a child? But Tanam, we learned in the Mishnah, this is Indian Bechor. Guys, let's say you buy an animal from a guy, and you don't know if the animal gave birth yet. How do you know if it's a Bechor or not? So if it's less than 3 years old, you can be assured that if it gives birth in your Rishus, that it's a Bechor. More than that, you don't know. So it says the Gemara, this is the proof that what? That a para less than 3 won't give birth. Para v'chamar, shalosh, vadai l'koyin. If you buy it and it's 3 years old or less, then vadai goes to the koyin because you can be sure it's the firstborn. Mikan ve'elich safik. After that, it's a safik. Hamaytzi mechaber olav le'raya. Well, what do you see? You see that what? That less than 3 can't give birth. In Cain, your teretz of less than the teretz does not work. That why it was less than 3. El mechavarta kedushin meikara. Rather, it's clear that the cows that they gave were hayrashah. In other words, the cows, there was a Rosh Shov, that's why they were bought as Karbanis, but for no other reason. Okay, now speaking a little bit more about what happened, what occurred there, it says, Vayesharna haporos baderech, al derech beis shemesh. So the Pasuk says, Vayesharna haporos baderech, al derech beis shemesh, b'mesila, achas holchu, they went one way, holach v'go'u, going and mooing, and they didn't turn right or left. So guys, since they didn't turn right or left, obviously they went straight. So why does it have to say Vayisharna? In other words, it says the end of the pasuk says they didn't go right or left. So why does it say Vayisharna? Vayisharna paris b'derech al derech beis shemesh. My Vayisharna. Rabbi Yochanan mishum remeya shamu shira. They said shira. The cow said shira. Right, Rav Zucha bar Tuvia Amarav, sheyashu pneyem kineged aroin. They turned around and they were walking backwards. They looked at the aron v'amru shira and they said shira. My shira amru. What shira did they say? Amr Rabbi Yochanan mishum Reb Meya as Yashim Moshe b'nei Yisrael. They said they said the same shira as Yashim Moshe. I think that just like why do they say this? HaKadosh Baruch Hu made his oilus with the Mitzrayim, right? He put him in the Yam and everything. So too HaKadosh Baruch Hu made his oilus with the Plishtim, right? Like think about what's happening to them, like major intestinal problems. It's too bad Doc's not here, right? That anyway, that's why I said Hashem Moshe. Rabbi Yochanan Yidei, that was Rabbi Yochanan in the name of Meir. Rabbi Yochanan Yidei says, "V'mata b'yamahu hodu Hashem kiru b'shmoi." Reish Lakish, Shimon Lakish, Omer Mizmoira Yasma. They said the Mizmer Yasma. Now, what was the Mizmer Yasma? Literally the Mizmer that is orphan. So Machlokes Rashi and Tosfos. Rashi seems to say is that what? It doesn't say the name of the person who did it. Tosfos says we don't know why it was said. The name of the person is Lav Dafka. We don't know why it was said. Usually you know why it was said. But anyway, it says Mizmer Shul Hashem Shechadash Kinef Leisasa. Haishia loy yaminoi uzroy katshoy. Rebbe Lazo Omer, Hashem Malach Yegazu Amin. Kadosh Baruch Hu, he ruled and he caused the people to tremble. V'Shmuel bar Nachmeni Amar, Hashem Malach Geish Labeis. Hashem, again, he's literally, he's glorified in the way, dressed in glory. Rabbi Yitzchak Nafka Amar, Roini Hashita. Sing, Shita refers to the arin that was made of shita wood. His knife fi b'roiv hadarach. You should be exalted in your beauty. You have you're tied with rikmei zav. I saw pshat that you're tied with the golden hemorrhoids and the golden mice. And you're glorified in the devir armoin in the I guess the devir is the Moshe Rabbeinu wrote a Torah and put it in the Aron. So that's it. And you have what? You have the crowns. Reb Ashi Masli Lo Lahod Reb Yitzchak Aha. By he ben Sarah Roin by Yom Moshe Kuma Hashem. Right? Yisrael my Amru. What did Yisrael say? Reb Yitzchak Roini Hashita. So they sang when the Aron went up. They sang. Amarav, Kiman Kari Parsoy L'Sifra Devir. Since you mentioned Devir, so why do the Persians call a book Devir? Mehacha, they get it from here. V'Shem Devir Lefnim Kiryat Seifa. The name of the city of Devir had been previously Kiryat Seifa. So we see that Devir is a book, Kiryat Seifa. And the Amrav Ashi, Kiman Kari Parsoy L'Nida Dashtana. We had that earlier. Why do they call a woman who's a Nida? Why do they call it Dashtana? So Mehacha Kiderach Nashim. It's a nutrican of the words Kiderach Nashim is called Dashtana. Okay, this is a good place to stop.